चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। नमः ॐ विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी इति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्यैव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधार श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। Am I audible to you clearly?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Thank you. So today we are discussing about mental health, and we'll be discussing broadly just give me a minute if this works out. So I'll be talking about mental health and how Bhagavad Gita, and specifically the prayers inspired by Bhagavad Gita, can actually help us to develop a greater level of positivity in our life. So I'll talk about this in two broad parts today and tomorrow. So today I will talk about what are emotions and what is mental health and how spirituality can help us in that. And within that, I'll talk about how we can deal with negativity, which is often the cause of emotional health, in two distinct ways by practicing spirituality. And to that end, we will discuss certain verses from the Bhagavad Gita which talk about certain key concepts. Now, let's begin with some of the prayers from Bhagavad Gita. Now, this is Arjuna asks Krishna, what are the characteristics of a self-realized person? And there, Krishna starts by replying something. So this is 254 to 72 is the section, 254 is the question, and 255 is the answer. So this is based on my book, Prayers Inspired by the Bhagavad Gita, in which I have taken Gita verses and we have prayers for key verses from the Gita. So here, Jesus says, hold my hand and hold my heart as I turn inward. Sri Bhagavan Vacha Rajahati Yada Kaman Sarvan Parthamano Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha Hita Pragya Sadochyate. When all desires the heart lets go, no worldly craving left to grow, rejoicing within, serene and satisfied, the steady stage is by wisdom fortified. Bhagavad Gita 2.55. So I'll read a couple of points over here. My dear Lord, for many lifetimes I have been chasing external objects, believing that the next thing to come into my vision will bring me happiness. Yet countless such pursuits in the past have turned out to be unproductive and even counterproductive. Please, O Lord, I beg you, give me the conviction to turn away from the world, and more importantly, turn away from the desires that make me turn towards the world. Mhm. So basically, if we look at how we exist and function, we have the soul, we have the mind, we have the body, and together these are what we call as the self. There's the soul, the mind, and the body. Now it's interesting. Now, if you outside here, there can be desirable and undesirable objects. So desirable we try to get, and undesirable we try to avoid. We have raga for the desirable and dvesha for the undesirable. So broadly, we could say that when we get the desirable, then this creates positive emotions within us. And when we get the undesirable, this creates negative emotions within us. Of course, the emotions are ultimately nothing that is experienced just by the mind. Soul is the source of consciousness. So now, in this, what is happening is in the outer world, there are sources of, or rather, there are objects which trigger certain emotions within us. So, most of the times, what we think, if say I want to be happy in my life, then I want to cut off all of these. I want to make sure that there are no undesirable stimuli in the outer world. And that is an impossible task because the world will always have dualities. And dualities means there will be positives and there will be negatives. So now what Krishna is telling is something very striking over here. What he's saying, if you look at this verse, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parth manogata. So Krishna is saying that it is in the mind, there are conceptions which determine this is desirable, this is undesirable. Now we could say, is it so when you say this is desirable and this is undesirable? So is it based on the characteristics of that particular object, or is it based on the conditionings of the mind? Now we could say there is both truth are there. Say if we consider food. Now if we consider some food as undesirable, for example. Now there could be two aspects to it. There is some food that is undesirable at the level of the body itself. For example, there is some food that could literally be poisonous. Mm. Something could smell terrible, something could be very extremely pungent, could be extremely spicy, could be extremely hot, could cause us burning. So there is undesirable from the perspective of the body, and from the mind, it could be that it tastes horrible. So now the interesting thing about emotions is that when we say this is undesirable, there is an objective reality to it. That there are things in the world which are undesirable. But there is a subjective side to it also. That there are things which may not be that undesirable. Say, for example, if we consider Karela, now that may not be particularly tasty, but it's quite healthy. So here what is happening is that something which is objectively good for the body is subjectively bad for the mind. Now, this is not true for everything. If you consider Ayurveda, there is a concept that there are certain foods which you naturally like, and what we naturally like, they may often be good for the body also. But again, naturally like doesn't mean excessively like. That doesn't mean that we go beyond particular limits. So this is not so much a talk about sense control. I'm just trying to explain and explore the idea of emotions. So emotions, when we experience, what is an emotion? It is a perception which is based on something. So, for example, we meet someone and that person is talking very sweetly, and maybe that person is asking us to invest money in their, they have some project, and somebody will say, "I've got a bad feeling about this. Got a bad feeling." Had something inside me is telling me this person is suspicious. This person should not be trusted. So what happens over here? Now, could it be that the person is actually untrustworthy? Maybe it is, and we have got some sixth sense that the person is untrustworthy. It's also possible that the person is trustworthy, but our mind is giving us a wrong signal over there. Maybe we have been scarred in the past, and because we were scarred in the past, maybe somebody cheated us in the past, and because of that, we start thinking now, oh, this person is also like this. This person is also untrustworthy, or I should not trust anyone. Now, so now, what are we talking about over here? That so are emotions completely a matter of the mind? No. Are they completely a matter of reality? No. It depends. So that's why there is an objective component to emotions. So when we say somebody has somebody's mental health is upset, somebody is depressed, or somebody is being very pessimistic, being very negative. So now it could be grounded in reality. It could be just a product of their mind. It could be half of both also. We don't know. So what are we talking about over here? That emotion, in one sense, is information. Mhm. Emotion is information, but exactly what is the information over there? Now, the information we could say that's let's start from the negative. And this is terrible. And sometimes it may be terrible. Say, if you're walking along on a street and we are about to enter a dark road, and something inside tells us, don't go over there. Now, this is some kind of a pit in the stomach, some kind of fear, some kind of nervousness comes inside us. That could very well be a warning that don't go over there. There's nothing wrong in that. That's terrible. So now that means the information something is terrible. Now, it's also possible that information is exaggerated. That means the danger worth 100, but there's a danger worth 5, which is portrayed as 100. Some people can have irrational fears, excessive fears. Somebody says that, oh, I can never enter into an elevator because I feel paranoid of it. I cannot go into a dark place. Now, it could also be distorted. Now, what do I mean by distorted? That actually, so let's put it this minus 100. It's big negative over here. Situation is minus 5, and we feel it's minus 100. Now, it could also be the situation is 5, but we feel it's minus 100. Now, it could also be completely inverted or perverted. Distorted means it's a positive situation, but we feel it's negative. Inverted means that it's actually plus 100 and we feel it to be minus 100. Now, if this seems a little complicated, why am I talking about all this? Let's go back to this particular diagram and I'll come back to this. What Krishna is saying that if we want to actually first be steady, if we first want to be steady before we can be happy. What do I mean by steady? We need to be peaceful. So if you are talking with someone and maybe we really enjoy that person's company, but if our mind is agitated, then even if you're talking with that person, we're just not able to listen to that person. Oh, maybe I'm going to lose my job. Maybe I did a health diagnosis and I'm going to get cancer. And what if I get cancer? Sitting with that person, we really enjoy that person's company, but we just can't enjoy that. So, in one sense, unless our mind, it has to be first steady. Steady means there has to be a certain level of peacefulness. Krishna will say in this series of verses a little later that ashantasya kutaha sukham. There is somebody ashanta, then one cannot have any happiness. Can we study first, then we'll be happy. Happy is, we can say joyful over here. So be steady, then be happy. It's like a spectrum. The mind state, the mind's emotions. If we're not peaceful, we cannot be joyful. Now it's interesting over here. Sometimes people seek to be seek some joy, some pleasure just because they don't have peace. And that is the time when it really backfires. That what does it mean? That means that say, if I am very agitated because of something, somebody spoke something to me, and at that time, because I'm agitated by something, I start, I want to feel good, and I start eating food. That's when you start eating comfort food, and we can get hooked to food. People often, when they drink or they smoke or they do drugs, or sometimes people do binge watching TV. Some people may go out shopping a lot, but they want to make themselves feel good. Oh, I buy some new clothes, I buy some new things. I feel good about myself. Now, here the problem is that it's not that we are peaceful and from that peaceful we are going towards being joyful. Here, what is happening is, if you could say the journey is I was here and from there I moved here. This is a healthy journey. That is, there is some foundational peace, and from there I go towards joy. But when you consider what would be an unhealthy journey, that say if I don't have any peace and then I try to seek some quick joy, this will be extremely unhealthy. This is where we all seek some what modern science calls as a quick dopamine hit. Dopamine hit is basically this dopamine is a neurochemical that makes us feel good temporarily. We surf on the internet and we find something which looks good for a few moments, we get a dopamine hit. Like that, we get dopamine hits. The idea over here is that if we don't have any basic level of peace and then we are seeking happiness, quite often that search for happiness becomes becomes excessive, it becomes destructive, it becomes addictive. So this is where when our we are looking for good, if you don't have a positive basic level of peace, it's like say in relationships. Somebody does not have a basic level of self-confidence, a sense of self-worth, then often they rush into the arms of anyone who gives them a little affection, shows them a little kindness, or just makes them feel a little good about themselves. Now, that person may be out to exploit them, and that person is just a mask. So, when a person does not have peace within, and then they seek happiness, their happiness is basically a way of running away from the lack of peace within. And that is extremely destructive. So, what Krishna is saying in the journey toward, if we want inner well being, the first thing he says is, Prajahati yada kaman. He says, let's draw this diagram once again. And we have the soul, we have the mind, then we have the body, and we have the outer world with the desirable and the undesirable. So what Krishna is saying is that at least for some time, we need to create a boundary between us and the outer world. Just turn away from the world. Create a boundary by which we are not looking at the world, but rather prajahati yada kaman, the consciousness that comes out. Normally, if you consider normally what is happening, the consciousness goes out to the outer objects. And it looks what is desirable, it looks what undesirable, start chasing those objects accordingly. But instead, Krishna says, don't do this. Instead, Krishna says that let the consciousness turn inwards. Let the consciousness turn inwards. Prajahati yada kaman, sarvan partha manogatan, manogatan. By the urges of the mind, it decides, oh, this is attractive. I want it right now. Run towards it. It is unattractive. This is terrible. This is disgusting. Run away from it. So that mana has the gati. So that manogatan, gatan refers to the word gati. Gati is speed, pace, which goes towards a particular destination. Now, now what happens is this whole, you just turn away from it. Okay, what the mind considers desirable, what the kind of mind considers undesirable, turn away from it to focus on Krishna. To turn determinedly towards Krishna and focus on Krishna. Just turn inwards. When we do this, we'll find that it just changes things for us. At least for some time during the day. So we may not be able to live like this all the time. It's interesting. Some people say, if I give up the desirable and the undesirable, then what will be the source of happiness for me? Because their idea is, not their idea, it's our general idea that when I get the desirable, I'll be happy. When I avoid the undesirable, at least I'll avoid some misery, some pain, some distress. So the whole life is centered on getting the desirable and avoiding the undesirable. If you consider Duryodhan, for him the desirable was, I want to get the kingdom. I want to be the next king. The undesirable was, the Pandavas should never be better than me. I should be better than the Pandavas. Everybody should feel that I am better than them. And for him, for Duryodhan, when the Pandavas performed the Rajsuya Yajna, and they got so many lavish gifts, that was a stuff of nightmares for him. So for him, he was completely driven by Raga and Dvesha. This is desirable, this is undesirable. Now we all will be driven by it. We may not be up to Duryodhan's level. Most of us are not, definitely. Where if something undesirable is to be avoided or something desirable is to be got, we go to any extreme. He wanted to kill the Pandavas just so that he could get to the desirable. That's an extreme action. But the point is that when we're just driven by desirables and undesirables, we are prone to a lot of emotional instability. That because if the undesirable comes, what are we going to do? If the desirable doesn't come, what are we going to do? Both ways, we are going to feel terrible. So, what our spirituality is meant to do is to at least give us some pathway, to give us some space, to give us some experience that there is a way to experience a higher reality. And that higher reality is such that it can give me peace. And beyond peace, it can give me some joy. So it's interesting what Krishna says is Turn away from the mind, sarvan partmanogatan. But after that, atmanya evatmana tushtaha. We become satisfied within ourselves. Atmanya evatmana tushtaha. Now, even when we pray, this is where it's very important how we practice our spirituality. Now, we may pray for a desirable. That means, Krishna, please let this help me get good marks in the exam. Please, Krishna, let this relationship get fixed. Krishna, please let this relationship get healed. Krishna, please let my disease, if I have a disease, let it go away. Krishna, please help me, whatever, earn more money. We pray for a desirable. That's also good. But the point is, it's almost like we are having that duality. And instead of getting out of the duality or getting beyond the duality, we are praying to Krishna to give us the positive side of the duality. And that's not going to last. You know? We pray for realizing that beyond this world, the spiritual, Krishna is the supreme desirable. That doesn't mean the world in the world there are no desirable things, but there is something beyond the world that is desirable, and that is Krishna. So when we pray for a desirable, for example, we are very agitated because something is going wrong. We come to a temple, participate in a just take darshan or sing a kirtan or participate in the kirtan, hear some katha, and we feel peaceful. So now that is also good. We pray for a desirable, we get it. But Krishna talks, this is good, but this is by far the best. When we understand that there is a bigger desirable reality, and that is the desirable reality. If I am with Krishna, that Krishna becomes a source of the supreme positivity. Now, if you go back to this particular both these diagrams over here, what happens is I showed only three levels of reality over here. Now there is another reality which you're often not aware of. Right next to the soul is the super soul. Is Krishna himself present in our hearts? And when we go inwards, we can go beyond ourselves to Krishna also. So bhakti is where we turn inwards through prayer, through meditation. We connect with Krishna, who becomes a source of sublime positivity for us. What is happening in the outer world, it does not matter so much. Now, of course, this is not the complete solution, especially when we are in the world. Because as I said, in the world, there are actual negativities also, and they need to be dealt with. So sometimes our mind may make a small problem very big. And when the emotions get distorted like that, we may get crushed by it. So when we practice bhakti, when we chant the holy names, when we pray to Krishna, we are gaining access to a completely different source of positivity that the world will not provide us. The world's positivity is, oh, if I get some good news, I feel happy. If I get some bad news, I feel terrible. Yes. So beyond the good news and the bad news is what is timeless. That is Krishna and our relationship with Krishna. So it's interesting if you look at it from one perspective that as society has progressed uh, over the last few centuries, if we consider in many ways material comforts have increased. Most people today don't live in the constant fear that maybe a snake will bite them and they will die, or a tiger will come and attack them and kill them. Most of us don't have to struggle to find the basic necessities of life. Where are we going to get drinking water? How are we going to have our meal next day? So I'm not comparing as a reference point to, say, Satyuga. This was compared a few hundred years ago. So the material comforts have increased. And yet, what has happened simultaneously is the mental distress has also increased. Now, which is a very weird phenomena. It's a very weird combination because if we say positive emotions come from positives in the outer world, then actually, so that means if I get more desirable things, then I'll be happier. So as compared to our ancestors, and by ancestors, I mean a few generations before, we certainly have more positive things in our life, at least at an immediate level. Mhm. Things are listed. And yet, our minds are much, much more fragile. We seem to be affected much, much more by negatives. Now, there are reasons for that. For example, because we live in an interconnected world, we get news of bad things happening everywhere in the world. And especially on social media, everybody is trying to catch attention. And one of the easiest ways to catch attention is by sharing some sensational news, and often sensational news, sensationally positive news are very rare. Sensational negative news are much more. So we could say that we are exposed to far more negativity in the world. That is what one reason, no doubt. But the problem is that uh, if we are here, so let's put it here now, we have our emotions can come from the material direction, and our emotions can come from a spiritual direction. Both ways we can get emotions. Now, the problem is, as society has become more and more materialistic, for most people, the spiritual emotions have become cut off. Our spirituality as a source of emotions has become cut off. So, whether it's going to a temple or doing something associated with something sacred, when they don't do that, then the only source of positive emotions is the material. And unfortunately, the material in the net balance will always give us negative emotions more than the positive. That's why this whole idea of Atmanyevatmana Tushtaha, that turning inwards, turning upwards, realizing our soul and realizing the soul of our soul, Krishna, to whatever degree is possible for us. That is vital for us to have positive emotions. So if you look at Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, at one level, nothing changed for him. If you look at the outer world, for him in the outer world, there was a battle to be fought, and no matter what he did, he would not be able to not fight the battle. That's what he was thinking that, okay, there's a terrible situation for me in the outer world. I do not want that terrible situation. But he just couldn't do anything about that. That terrible situation was out there. And Krishna told him that to try to avoid the more terrible situation, avoid the terrible situation, you will end up with a more terrible situation. Let's try to understand this particular situation for Arjuna. See, there is a situation. And from that situation comes an emotion. Now, now there is an external situation. We could even say this is a temporary situation, but it's nonetheless a situation. From there comes an emotion. So now what is the external situation? The external situation was the stuff of nightmares for Arjuna. He- Especially when he saw Bhishma and Drona on the opposite side. Bhishma Drona Muktaha Sarvesham cha Mahikshitam. Among all the kings, his eyes zeroed on Bhishma and Drona. And when that happened, he was just devastated. Why devastated? because these were not just elders for him. These were the elders from whom he had learned archery. These were the elders for whose pleasure he had learned archery. And now these were the same elders that he had to kill with that same archery. For a person, there could not be a worse nightmare than this. Mm. So what do you do at your time? Just wanted to get away from that. But Krishna told him, you just cannot. You may decide not to fight, but the Kauravas are going to fight and they will destroy your remaining family and you won't be able to live with yourself with them. Even if they somehow spare your family, they will go and target all your allies. He will attack Drupada. He will attack Virata. He will attack all those who have chosen your side instead of his side. He will make their life a living hell. And again, you will not be able to live with yourself because of that. So you have to deal with this. How do you deal with this? He told him that I have to get away from it. So you cannot get away from the situation. Then Krishna told him that what do you do? There is a internal spiritual reality. And that is also a source of emotion. Now, this emotion for him was overwhelmingly negative. But from here, he got a positive emotion. And by understanding Krishna, by understanding his relationship with Krishna, he got such a positivity that he says at the end of the Gita, Ashto mohasviturlabdha prasadan mayachyuta. Sitosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava. Now we may say, I'll address two brief points over here. And both these points I'll be discussing more in elaborate in tomorrow's session. But at this point, the first would be that what if from here itself we don't get the positive? That means we chant, we pray, and we don't feel positive at that time. Or worse still, what if from here we start feeling negative? From in our relationship with Krishna, we start feeling negative. What happens over there? That could seem very problematic. Externally, we're getting the more negative emotions. Internally, also getting negative emotions. Where will we go then? We could be ruined for that. That's a possibility that we'll discuss tomorrow, where we will be discussing about the purification of emotions. Here, I'm not going to discuss the purification of emotions. What I discussed is that emotional health and emotional well being requires that we have a channel, a stimulus for our information, a source for our emotions that goes beyond the ups and downs of the world. So we'll discuss about that part. That once we get purified, then the inner emotions, the inner positive will become much more continuous and much more powerful. And the second point is that the outer from internally I got positive. Are you able to hear me? Internally, internally, the positivity that is there that may or may not last. But even if the internal positivity is there, now the external will still have some negative situations. Can you just wish it away? That say, suppose somebody has lost their job, they have to be completely depressed. Shaken out, and it's not just feeling of depression. Okay, how will I take care of a family? How will I sustain myself? And they come to a temple and they pray and they feel better. But is that feeling better enough? You still have to do something to deal with the outer situation, isn't it? And yes, that is. So bhakti is not just about denying or running away from the outer source of negative. We also have to deal with that.
And actually, what will happen is that once we are internally strengthened, then we can deal with the outer negativity and do something to fix it. The theme I'll talk about is right now, last point I said, that there is we need to have an emotion inventory. Just like we have a money inventory. Okay, how much money is coming in, how much money is going out, how much is in balance right now. So for all of us, there will be things which will be a source of positivity, and there will be things which are a source of negative. Now, this is just life. Everybody will have something which will be positive, something will be negative. Now, sometimes the same thing may also sometimes be positive, sometimes be negative. We may be learning some new skills, we may be training and developing some ability, some quality, and we may have a guide, a mentor, a counselor, a guru. And sometimes what they speak encourages us. Sometimes what they speak enlivens us, and that's wonderful. And sometimes what they speak may agitate us. Sometimes what they speak may just feel like open heart surgery. What's going on over here? So now both are possible. But overall, everybody, so when I am talking about negative, that means the way we feel about it. If somebody may chastise us and they may have good intentions. They may be our well wishers, but still, when they're chastising us, we may feel terrible at that time. So at that time when we are feeling negative, we need to have to deal with that. So each one of us, we could say that we need to be able to balance, okay, what are the sources of positivity for me? What are the sources of negativity for me? And how can I keep a balance between the two? How can I ensure that if there are negative things in my life, how can I balance them with the positive? So, say if we have to meet with a dozen people in one day, and all those people are upset with us, and as soon as they meet, as soon as they start criticizing us, they start condemning us, they start calling bad names to us. No, one person is difficult to tolerate, two people are difficult to tolerate, three people are difficult to tolerate, even more difficult. But if we have dozen people who are all out for our blood, we will get knocked out. And if we don't get knocked out, then we'll want to knock somebody out. Either we will become very, very overwhelmed and feel crushed, or we'll become very aggressive and vengeful. So now that is happening, we need some source of positivity. That source of positivity is not there, we will not be able to function. So that emotion inventory means we have to find out for ourselves, not in an absolute sense, that this should be a source of positivity and this should be a source of negativity. No, right now, what is the source of positivity for me? So it's not that sometimes people say, keep a gratitude journal, and that's good. But when we are keeping a gratitude journal, we cannot talk about what we should feel grateful for. It is what do I feel grateful for right now. Sometimes it's so complicated that what we should feel grateful for, we start thinking about writing out that, but we don't feel grateful for that. And then we start feeling dreadful that we don't feel grateful. And then what should have been an exercise in positivity start becomes an exercise in negativity. Oh, there's this good thing in my life and that good thing in my life, but I am such a terrible person that I don't value how good it is. And then trying to list what is good in my life makes me feel further bad about myself, feel bad about life or everything. So when we want to talk about this, at present, right now, what are the things that are positive in my life? What are the things that I feel grateful for? And take a step forward from there. What we want to see is it's currently, what is currently means today, this week, this month, and this can change with time. We also evolve, we go through different experiences. So we make a list of this. So to a large extent, our Krishna consciousness will be a source of positive. And within that also, as I said, some negativity might come up. It might not be a negative permanently, but we have to go through purification. But even within Krishna consciousness, even with our spiritual practice, when we understand that there are some things which are positive, right now for me as I experience them, then we can take shelter of those things. And in that way, we can have a greater balance in our emotions. We can't completely eliminate the source of negativity, but when we have the source of positivity for us. Now, when we say Krishna consciousness is a source of positivity, what does it mean? At one level, we can say, oh, no, I just remember Krishna, I feel good. That's good, but it's something much, much more than that. It's an understanding that not just this is an experience, but it is a higher reality. That Krishna, that I'm a part of Krishna. Krishna loves me. Krishna wants the best for me. And Krishna is moving things in a way that will be ultimately the best for me. When we understand that part about how the objective reality, whether negativity, how we can re-envision that in a more positive way. I talk about that in tomorrow's session. So today, with respect to emotional well-being, mental health, what we talked about today was three main points. If it was that first is that what are emotions? So emotions are, they are both objective and subjective. Objective means there are dangers out there and our emotions can warn us about the dangers. But emotions can also be just distortions or exaggerations or complete inversions where there's a reality, but what we are perceiving is completely opposite. Sometimes we have a bad feeling about someone because there's something suspicious about that person. And sometimes we may have bad feeling because actually we have been misled by somebody in the past and we are projecting it on this person. So in general, in the world, there will be desirables and undesirables. And from there, emotions do come up. So emotions can be objective and subjective. And we cannot be in a situation where there'll be only desirable and no undesirable in our life. Life will never work out like that. Then we discussed today that how, for normally, what would be, if you want to say emotional health or emotional well-being, ideally how it should be working is first in the emotional health direction, we need to first have, we need to be peaceful and then we can build on it to be joyful. We feel content to be at home and then we're together with our loved ones and then some nice food is cooked and we eat that food. So then that food brings great joy. But instead of going that way, there is no peace and then we seek some joy. We seek what is a dopamine hit. We seek some quick stimulus. This is where that source of positivity will become destructive. Our indulgence will be excessive. So watching TV can, okay, if you're watching TV, it feels good. I'm watching this, I'm watching that. But if that's because there is an emptiness inside, then we'll become more binge watching TV. There can be shopaholics, people who buy, there's splurging. So that can be destructive, that can even become addictive. So emotional health has to be built first on being peaceful and then being joyful. And how does that foundation of peacefulness come? That is where I talked about spirituality. How spirituality can be a source of positivity. How does it work for us? See, I am here and there is a source of emotion coming to me. from the external and the source of emotion coming to me from the internal. Internal means there is spiritual reality over here, the material reality over here. Now, paradoxically, what has happened is that the material externals to a significant extent have improved, but still our emotions have become worsened. Our health, emotional health is not so good because we have largely cut ourselves off from the spiritual. So, what we need to do is the spiritual is something which can be stably positive for us over a period of time. With this can be both positive, external can be positive and negative, but overall, in due course of time, the negative may become much, much more. And that's how we need to have that inner source of positivity. And when we connect with Krishna and understand not just that Krishna is a presence when I connect with him, I feel peaceful, but Krishna is a person who wants the best for me, then that will bring a significant level of positive emotions in our life. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna, dear all participants. You can ask your doubts in the chat box or you can raise your hand so we can unmute and you can ask your question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Uh, Thank you for
Hare
a very
Krishna.
wonderful lecture. This was very, very insightful. So I have a question about spirituality as a positive source. Uh, so my understanding is that spirituality is a practice. So it is a positive source, not just intellectually knowing that Krishna is the supreme, but practicing so that my mind is um, convinced and therefore steady that Krishna is a positive source. So the practice of spirituality itself, uh, there may be times where my mind is so unsteady that it doesn't allow me to do the practice. At which time, wh- what should the approach be? Like, one idea I got from you is if you are grateful for those spiritual practices that you are actually grateful for, not just intellectually grateful for, then you can take shelter in those practices. That's one approach, but I was just thinking if there's more you can share about this.
Yeah, good point. Actually, is it in spirituality, there's philosophy and there is practice. There's what Raja Vidya Raja Guhyam, Pavitra Vidavuttam. Krishna says that Pratyaksha Dharmim. Is actually something which we experience also ourselves. So now, while these are two distinct limbs, they are not just completely separate. The philosophy actually sustains, and the practice philosophy inspires us to practice. And the practice also gives us greater conviction about the philosophy. So they're related, they're not completely watertight, distinct things. So now, with respect to the practice, it is that the practice is meant to give us some experience. So now when we get the experience, see what happens with time. In some ways, we have science. In science, we have theory and experiment. Now what happens is, if the experiment is done successfully, based on that experiment, some technology is made. And people can use that technology very easily. Right now, we are using Zoom. Now, how many of us know what is the theory exactly behind the internet, how electronic magnetic waves go through, how communication happens? We may not know all that, but we are using the technology. So what happens is, over a period of time, the practice gets codified into a religion. So now religion has aspects like culture, religion has aspects like rituals. So Now, sometimes we may adopt something as a part of our culture. We may we may get into a habit of doing some rituals. But sometimes if some things are not working, we may not get the experience to those. Just like I'm using the technology, when the technology is there, when the technology somehow doesn't seem to be working, if my phone is not working, my internet is not working, I need to be able to figure it out at that time. Okay, why is this not working? I need to go to an expert to find out why is it not working. So many times when certain aspects of our culture don't make sense to us, and certain practices that we are doing, they don't seem to be having the desired result. No, that's where we need a spiritual guide. We need a guru. We need some level of spiritual guidance by which we will be able to move forward. If we don't get that, we will be lost. That's why it's so important for us to have that guidance. And when we are not feeling positive, then it is possible that the gadget is not working, technology, something has to be fixed over there. Sometimes we may not be operating the device properly. There are various possibilities, but there has to be consultation with somebody who is connected. That's why spirituality is not so much about just an isolated practice. So I would say that having some association is very helpful, so that if anything is going off in our practice, we can learn to fix it. And third thing I would say is, or the first thing you said yourself, that find out those which you like to do. Second is try to get this big picture of what is doing. Try to talk with, have some spiritually minded friends and guides whom you can talk and see what needs to be fixed. The third thing I would say is that it is a matter of the philosophy. It's not just intellectual. The philosophy also helps us to persist through a phase of negativity. Just like if I'm taking some medicine, now sometimes the medicine might be bitter. I might not want to take it, but I'll push through and take the medicine because I know it is good for me. So like that, the philosophy can also give us the conviction that maybe what I'm experiencing right now is not a complete picture of reality. So I'll talk about this a little bit tomorrow also more. But don't minimize the philosophy aspect. I saw a number of questions over here. Sometimes the subjective emotion gets so negative that I cannot take stable center of spirituality. So we have to find out some source of positivity, even if it is tiny. See, one of the things that happens is when we are feeling too negative, we start devaluing the positive. So Shanai Shanai Ruparame Krishna says, take small steps. Do not devalue the power of small steps. When we are facing a big problem, what is the small change going to do? Well, we may feel it's not going to do anything, and then we may not try anything at all. But that is not a healthy way of functioning. Do what you can in that situation, and things will improve based on that. I don't think we should say that agitated situations should not affect our mind. Philosophically, we should be stressed unaffected. This is a complete misunderstanding of how things work in life. See, the mind is just like the body. And I may philosophically understand that I'm not my body. But if somebody hits me with a heavy stick and my hand is fractured, my arm is fractured, can I say that I'm not the body and therefore I should not be affected? It's an absurd expectation. The body is a tool and it is damaged. So similarly, the mind is also a tool and the mind can be damaged. So to think that because I know the philosophy, I should not get agitated is completely, we are dehumanizing ourselves. Yes. Arjuna heard the whole philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. Yet when his son Abhimanyu was killed, Arjuna was shattered. Arjuna broke down. He started crying. He started blaming his brothers. He started blaming himself. So now at that time, Krishna did not tell him, "You fool! I just spoke the Bhagavad Gita to you 13 days ago. You forgot it already? What a dumb person you are. Maybe I should have found somebody else to speak the Bhagavad Gita to." No. So the mind is a tool, and the mind can get injured. So when that happens, what do we do? Say if my hand is fractured, I cannot deny my hand is fractured. But okay, this is an injury, and this can be cured. So it will need some proper healing, but it will get healed. So uh, we cannot stop our life completely and think this is the end of my life because my hand is fractured. At the same time, we cannot deny that some aspects of our life will have to change because our hand is fractured. We can no longer lift weights with that hand. So when we are emotionally wounded, we there will be problems. Like there's a question that I've lost a number of loved ones, and there's a fear of the loss. It's an emotional wound, and it'll take time to heal from there. So we need to acknowledge that maybe there's some things I have to be careful, and some things have affected me severely, and I'll have to deal with them. So I'll talk about this a bit more tomorrow. But let me quickly explain this point that if we consider the mind, are you able to see my screen right now? In the mind, there are impressions in the mind. And these impressions, they can be positive or they can be negative. These impressions are sometimes called as samskar. Now we can have samskar as good samskar. Somebody gets, we as parents, we want to do good samskar to our children. Samskars can be positive, but they can also be negative in the sense that for some people, say somebody was bitten by a dog in their childhood. Now, whenever they feel or see a dog, they might feel very uncomfortable. So, samskar in the negative sense means that everybody has some scar in their psyche. And the scar is there that is going to affect them. If my hand was fractured, I suddenly move my hand, I might feel unbearable pain at that time. So, in general, the idea is that if there is a physical injury, and normally somebody comes and taps me on the shoulder, I'm not feeling, okay, what do you want? I mean, if somebody taps me on the shoulder when I say shoulder is injured, I scream in pain. So what happens at that time? In general, when there's an injury, small stimulus, huge reaction. So that's just the nature of an injury. So I have to be careful. No, if somebody, I should inform others that don't tap me on the shoulder over here, I have an injury over here. So like that, we have to take the necessary precautions. So don't think that this should not happen. That's a horrifying misconception by which our spirituality will subject us to a lot of guilt. And we will start beating ourselves up for things that we should not be beating ourselves up for. There is philosophical truth, which is very important. That, see, I should not think my body is my everything. Similarly, I should not think my mind is everything. I am not my mind, I am not my body. But both my body and my mind are part of me right now. And because they are a part of me, what affects them will affect me, at least affect a part of me. So we have to acknowledge that we will be affected. But it's not the entire me. This does not define me completely. And I should not let it define me completely. So regarding fear of loss, I'll talk about that more in tomorrow's session. about how to deal with the negative samskaras. Now, how can we share the benefits of spiritual practice with those who are living on dopamine hits to social media, drugs, alcohol, etc.? Well, it's not easy. Generally, whom can we offer help? Any kind of spiritual help. Broadly, there are two kinds of people. There are people who are unable and people who are unwilling. So they may be unable because of various reasons. They just don't have the knowledge. They don't know. They don't have the support to practice it. Support means they don't have the environment, they don't have the facilities, they don't have whatever would be required to practice it. Now, third is that they don't have the practical tools or the techniques. How should I be dealing with this situation? How should I be dealing with this particular kind of thing? So, in various ways, people may be unable. So, unable could mean that, say, let's take the example, somebody doesn't know how to drive a car. Then we have to give them the knowledge, we have to give them the training. And then when they're driving, maybe they should drive with somebody, a learner's permit is there. And then some cars are much more complicated to handle. They start with some simple car. But if somebody is unwilling, then we really can't help them. So then sometimes it's difficult, but maybe they have to go to a particular place in their life where they start realizing these dopamine hits are actually, they are hitting me and they're hurting me and they're ruining me and I cannot go on this path. So everybody gets this realization what happens is the dopamine hits, and whatever hit we get, afterwards, it's not enough. And that's why a person takes some alcohol, they want to take more alcohol and more alcohol and more alcohol. And that's how they go on the path towards self-destruction and addiction. So sometime or the other, they will get that sense. This is not working for me. This has started working against me now. At that time, they will move from being unwilling to maybe I become willing now. So we should be there for them to help at that time. So how to develop a healthy sense of self-worth and self-esteem? That is where our bhakti spirituality comes in. For all of us, we often view ourselves from the social mirror, how others see us. And that's natural. We will be shaped by that. But this should not be the only way we see ourselves. Far more important is, above me is Krishna and how Krishna sees me. Krishna sees each one of us as worthy, and not just worthy now, but always worthy. Once we understand that, then we can move forward positively. So connecting with Krishna is very, very important. So I'll take one last question. So I'm in body and mental consciousness. I think I answered the question already, that my mind is scarred badly. Now, if our fellow devotees are annoyed with us because of whatever, we're not doing enough or we're unproductive, they see me as a failure. I feel it to be a failure because they are annoyed with me. They also take me to a burden. Take me to a burden. It's a difficult situation. And I would say that we also need Sajatiya. Sajatiya Sangha means that we need like-minded association. So we can't let ourselves and our conceptions about ourselves be shaped only by devotees who are critical of us. Now, devotees can have high expectations from us, and that can be good because that can enable us to do better things in life, to become a better person. But when is expectation an energizer, and when is expectation exhauster? When does it become a burden, and when it's become a stimulant? That is something which each individual has to perceive for themselves. And accordingly, they need to modify themselves. They need to modify their behavior, modify their actions. That's how we'll be able to move ahead in our lives. So try to find out those devotees who understand our situation, who support us in our particular situations. And nowadays, as society is becoming more open about emotional wounds and emotional scars and traumas and past things like that, then even our devotional society is also becoming more open to that. You'll be able to connect with the devotees who understand this more, and we get support from them. So, like I said, they keep the energy inventory. That means even among devotees, some devotees may become a source of negativity for us at present. They may be our well-wishers, but the way they are acting is being negative for us. We also need somebody who is a source of positivity for us to find that kind of association. Thank you very much. We'll continue tomorrow and we'll discuss about the challenges in dealing with practical situations when there is negativity in our life, and also discuss with about the negativity when we don't feel positive with our regard due to our spirituality also. Hare Krishna.